afternoon, and we would like to welcome you to a special edition of Truth Talk. We are going to give a response, if we can call it that, today to this week's Supreme Court decision to overturn Roe and Casey with the Dobbs case out of Mississippi. So today is June the 26th, and we're just going to, first of all, talk about our Christian response, and then maybe to the case and what is happening, and then maybe looking ahead for the church, what is our future response and how do we need to plan to address other issues that arise out of this change in abortion law within the United States of America. So a brief overview of what the overturn of Roe v. Wade and the Casey ruling, which happened after Roe, but still in the 70s, is basically that federalized abortion in the United States of America and said that it was a constitutional right to an abortion.
It basically made it the law of the land that a woman had the right to have an abortion in any of the states of the United States of America. So the courts took on themselves the ability to establish law, which is not in the purview of the courts. The courts are to rule on laws that are made by the legislature and then signed by the executive branch. And so they stepped past the Constitution and enacted a law. That's what took place. And so then now what took place on Friday is the court said, well, wait a minute, we do not recognize that as established law, which is the big brouhaha. Once a law is established and seen as precedent, then the court rules on that precedent and does not go back and overturn that precedent is the thing. Of course it does. It has in times past, thank goodness, because it did it on several cases. But as a general rule, it does not. Once you have accepted precedent, then you don't go back and overturn that. But in this particular case, the precedent was set upon an unconstitutional establishment of a law, not a legislative adoption or legislative law that had passed through the House and the Senate and then signed by the President. That's your two houses, which is your legislative and then your executive signing it into law. And so the Supreme Court said, we made a mistake. We should have never established a law. That is up to the people. The moment the court starts doing that, it's no longer we the people, it's them the court.
Right.
And we no longer have the United States of America. We have the United States of the Supreme Court.
Right. And it's funny, if you go back and read legal articles and legal replies, most lawyers, even judges from the Supreme Court made statements was, well, this is not constitutional, right, but it was what was the right thing to do. Well, that's not what the Supreme Court is there for. That is not how the structure of our nation.
If it is the will of the people, the will of the people will vote. It will become a law, and then the law will become the established rule of the land. But they went around the will of the people. That's right,
and that's what is so funny to me, the fact that it was not ever constitutional, yet. And then you get into which we'll talk some more, is like, well, then who determines it's the right thing to do? Right. You know, like that's a moral value that it's up to the people to decide, right, and everything. And so it's really crazy to me that, and we've been hampered by a left-leaning court for quite some time. So for 50 years, this was the ruling, and it's because we've never had since that time, we've not had a constitutionally conservative court.
Right.
So that we're willing to look at the legal constitutionality of the argument and take it up. Now, the pro-life advocates have for years petitioned the court to hear their case, but it's consistently been rejected by courts up until this Casey. When was the Casey case introduced? Last year? Was it last year or the year before?
I don't know,
It's
recently.
been recently introduced.
In
There's
Mississippi.
lots of courts that it takes time to move its way up. Casey did Dobbs. I mean, not Casey, but Dobbs. Did not take as long to move up through the court system as a lot of cases do. For example, there's a Supreme Court case that we're still waiting to hear the judge's rendering on, which is Judge Kennedy in Washington, not Judge, Coach Kennedy, in Washington. And he was fired. He was a public school teacher and coach, and he was a football coach. And he was fired for after the game was over, at the end of the game, kids were free to go home after locker room meetings and everything. He would go out to the end zone and pray. He was compelled by the Kendricks Brothers film Facing the Giants to be a prayerful coach, and so he would pray. And this was 10 years ago, and it just was presented. The arguments were presented in this past year for this case. So it typically takes a very long time for things to move up through the court system and be before the judge, and that's where God's timing is sovereign. You know,
the court system, rightfully so, is a slow system, and the cases will come up. The Kennedy case has already been up and sent back down and said, look, actually the judges says go back down and do this to it. They gave them instructions on what needed to be done and then bring it back to us. And so we're anticipating a good decision on that because the judges says this is what needs to be done to the case before it comes back before us. So the judges see these cases, do things to them, and they come back through the system. So,
and these things don't just happen by, I mean, there are very conservative, mostly Christian-based legal counsels out there working hard on behalf of constitutional law and biblical law. These are firms that, like Alliance Defending Freedom, is Liberty Counsel, and there's one more that argued a case this year before the Supreme Court, and I can't remember what it is, but these are Christian worldview law firms that look for cases that have a solid argument, because you don't want to waste the limited resources that you have because most of the time these cases are taken on pro bono, so they're not charging like these individuals who are being sued or who are suing or petitioning to do that. So they are going out there and taking it. So they do have to look for a strong case. But it is an active ministry that we as the church need to be aware of and be supportive of, because
that's another thing that took a while, because they had to build this network of legal systems. They had to build the cases and the people and look for the cases. So they defended a lot of people before the right cases came along. I remember years ago, I went to some of the workshops for some of these networks getting started and everything, and I mean, that was 40 years ago, as they were just being. So all that had to take place to work its way. So when the right synergy got there, so we finally got some conservative judges that would look at the Constitution. And when I say that, I don't expect the judges to overlook the Constitution if a person that is religious brings a non-constitutional matter up. I expect them to rule constitutionally.
Right.
So, that's what we want. We want the person to look, the judge to look and rule based upon our Constitution, and that's what it should stand on, no matter who brings it before, the circumstance before it.
Because without a doubt, our country was founded on a biblical worldview, which is why it is, for the Christian, it's very difficult to separate the argument of for life from it being a purely secular constitutionality of the law versus a moral law. So I think one thing that has bothered me by a lot of Christians that I have seen responding to this, whether it's on social media or in group chat, or whatnot, in one-on-one conversations or through the media or whatnot, is how they're like, well, I mean, there's been some just equivocating on the part of some, not all, people who are saying, well, I don't really want to get into questioning women's health care. Abortion is not women's health care.
Correct.
And I think we need to be very clear that abortion is not a health care issue.
Right.
99% of abortions are a contraceptive issue.
Right.
And is used as a means to terminate an unwanted and unplanned for pregnancy.
Because I wanted to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's and that's a good. I think we want to go down that trail some, but let's back way back
Mm-hmm.
and look at how we got there at all. And that is, it's not the whole issue really was not about women's rights so much, or about abortion. In the late 50s and 60s, the socialist movement had, and of course I believe, because of who I am, undergirded by Satan,
Mm-hmm.
was trying to destroy this country. Because as long as this country is here, it stands as a tool against everything Satan stands for. While the United States is not perfect, and I don't believe we stand here and say that the United States is God's chosen nation. That is not
At all.
what it. But it is a country that has principles that are godly,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as men are in it, it's imperfect.
Right.
But it does have godly principles, and it was founded on a very firm constitutional basis that had godly principles. I mean, the Bible is written all into the
Mm-hmm.
Constitution of the United States of America. And so, as long as it's here, it stands as a rebuke to other nations
Mm-hmm.
on earth, and to the devil's system that he's trying his best to build on planet Earth, his world. And so he is in the business of trying to destroy this country. And so he enacted the socialist movement that was trying to destroy America. And the upheaval of the late 50s and 60s was a social movement that was trying to destroy America by separating it and pitting Americans against Americans. And the big development of that was to pit the black America against white America and poor America against rich America. That's the socialist pattern.
And women against men. It's always about disunity.
Division. And though it was successful in causing division, it was not successful in causing the divide that it wanted. It did not. By the late 60s, it had not caused the social divide that socialism had hoped for.
Mm-hmm.
And so it needed something in the mix that would cause more division. And so the hope would be that it would cause a division between the male and the female. So entered into this thing was to try to cause more of the breakdown between man and woman.
And the breakdown of the family. That is, to me, that is what was still strong.
Yeah.
Was strong family values. And when the initial movement didn't help, well, how else are you going to break down? Like when the racial division wasn't working and the classism division wasn't working, then what's the next step to that?
At least not the
you
speed
get
they
into the
wanted
sexism, and then that was inserted, and that created the first real schism there in the late 60s.
So you had two things that happened. You had the war on poverty, which was under Johnson, which destroyed the black family.
Mm-hmm.
And so before the war on poverty, the rate of marriage inside of the black family was way up there. I used to have those. It was like 70-something percent.
78, I think is what I heard. 78, 79%.
And it plummeted. and the black family was destroyed in just like a decade. And then starting with 73 with the Roe versus Wade decision, you had this division begin that destroyed a lot of the caused attention, but destroyed the family inside of the Caucasian, the white race, and you saw that begin to plummet until today. We are at less than 50-50 inside of the white race. So now you've destroyed the family in the black race, and you're destroying the family in the white race, and so now you're causing the total, tearing, ripping apart of the fiber of what undergirds the country. So if you couldn't destroy it one way, we've gone the other way in destroying the family. So the devil's sneaky.
So out of that comes this decision about termination of children.
Right.
And really it's part of the feminist movement, the My Body, My Choice movement, who started, I don't have to be held accountable for my consequences. And that is very much how abortion is used. If you go look at the statistics, there's a greater percent of married women. I think it's over 50% of people who received abortions are married. It used to be a disproportionate number of women who received abortions were African American. It's leveling out some over the years as this becomes a topic of as a more social movement. And it just floors me when you hear actors and actresses just flamboyantly embrace abortion. I remember hearing an actress on TV that was talking about abortion, and she was proud of the 7 or 8 abortions she had had, and those people gives this idealistic view of abortion as a way to deal with a problem, but it doesn't address the what happens after. To the average woman who receives an abortion, it doesn't address the trauma, the grief, and the guilt that is a lot of times present after receiving these services.
Right.
So I think it's important, though, that we get back to our Christian response as to why we believe abortion is evil. And it starts at the very beginning of our Bible, when in Genesis it tells us that God conferred upon man his own image. Right. We were made in the image of God, his imago Dei, and gave to us his breath of life. So he physically breathed into us. He gave us his image and breathed life into us. And for us to take it upon ourselves to determine that God is still the author and creator of life. It's not a evolutionary fact that a sperm unites with an egg and creates a zygote, and then it just so happens. The creation of a child begins in the heart of God and takes over in the body of man, because there is still every single person created, whether they ever are born or not, but every single person created is made in the image of God, and has life from the moment that conception begins.
And when they originally started in the 70s with saying it was tissue and this or that, they didn't imagine that one day we would have imaging equipment and all that we have today. So they just took your argument you said there and poo-pooed it and said, but now we can see that little bitty baby very early on in its
You can
stages.
detect that heartbeat within 20-something days.
Yeah.
In 22 days, I think you can see life begin. But still, what is there to terminate if there's nothing there? See, you take it back all your scientific and everything. What are you getting rid of if there's nothing there? It's life. Right. It is a living, growing being. And they want to cloud the proponents of abortion want to cloud the issue with noise that talks about, oh, well, it doesn't have it doesn't have its inherent ability to understand this or that. It doesn't matter. You know, it is alive. And science itself can be used to defend against those arguments. It can, the growing child can feel pain. It can respond to external stimulant.
Nowadays, they can actually do surgery.
That's right.
On that infant child in the womb. So they make the arguments about, so this is my body, it's my choice. Well, no, it's not your body. It's another body inside of you, but it's not your body, because that body has its own DNA. That body has its own fingerprints. That body has its own working system. It needs its own sustenance. It has its own digestive system. It operates. So they say, yeah, but it can't operate by itself. It needs help. Well, that's true, you know, but that doesn't mean that you have the right to extinguish that life just because it needs your help to operate. That same body that has its fingerprints, its DNA, its own brain, its own eyes, its own same feet, that needs your help, guess what? 12 months from now, after that child's born, it's going to be outside the womb, and it's going to have fingerprints, it's going to have its DNA, it's going to have its own, but it's going to need your help still to live, because if you just lay it down out here, that child is not going to be able to operate on its own. You're going to have to still feed it. You're going to have to still look after it. The only difference that's going to happen is it's going to go from here
in the womb to outside.
Here, outside the womb. That's the only thing that's going to change.
Right.
It's nothing's going to change itself where it is.
Yeah, that's not an argument that is going to be successful. To me, for abortion rights.
No.
You know, we have to consider, as a Christian, your main argument is going to be based on our moral values. And for me, if you're not a Christian, what are you basing your argument on? Where's the morality component for the non-Christian?
Right.
You know, there are no moral values outside of an authority. You know, so
why should I let you live?
Exactly. Why should, so if a train is coming at me full speed and I push you in front of that train, or either we're tied together and I pull you over to save my life, is that a moral argument? I mean, that is the argument, you know. So you have to be really careful, because if your argument is not based on an authoritative reasoning, and for us it's a biblical worldview, in the fact that God gave us life and we are to use this life to worship Him and to bring about His plan, then everything else is noise.
Yes.
You know, so while it might be good that you have this moral value, your moral value may change based upon your life circumstances if it's not based on an absolute authority. And I think that's where, for me, why it is so important that your response, even to people who are not Christian, be a Christian response.
Right.
Because at least yours isn't based upon this, you know, innocuous moral value that may change as your circumstances change.
It's
relative.
Yeah.
It's That's what humanism is.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what, you know, postmodernism is, and all these humanistic value systems.
If that's true, who's to say Hitler wasn't right, or Mother Teresa wasn't right, or whoever? If it's just relative, who says what's right?
Right.
And so there has to be an authority. So we believe we have good reason to say we know who the authority is.
Right.
We're not guessing. We're not just hoping we're right. We have good, solid, evidentiary reason to believe we know who the moral authority is.
That's right. And, you know, there's a lot of resources out there to help you. A lot of times we have beliefs, but it's very hard for us to put into words and to educate ourselves enough to be able to speak thoughtfully about issues like this, because they are very passionate issues, and but I never want to get into and by argument I don't mean like we're arguing
Discussion.
together. It's more of a debate style thing. This is what I believe, and you can have your opinion. You know, people can have differing opinions. I believe my opinion is right, but I don't have to put somebody down to assert my opinion.
But that's what got us here, because there is no debate about this. That's what got us to 1973.
Right.
Because you can't have this discussion. There is no discussion that says it's all right to kill another human being.
I just mean that you don't have to put somebody down to say my opinion is right.
But when you get into discussion what the other side does, because they don't have a point. There's no way you can nicely say it's all right for me to live my lifestyle the way I want to, and then when I become pregnant to kill my baby. There's no way to nicely say that.
Yeah. We as a Christian must say unequivocally, this is wrong.
Wrong. So what they do then is they start, the moment you nicely say, let's discuss this, they realize that argument, that there's no way they can win that argument. So next thing, they start calling you names. You are xenophobic, homophobic, you're phobic something. You become some name, and then they start screaming at you, and from there you can't have a discussion. There's no longer a real, and by that I don't mean everyone. There's a few, but by and large it becomes
the
them
movement.
Screaming. If it's me, the first thing they're going to tell me is, "You're a man. You don't have a right to discuss this." Excuse me?
Yet they want to hold, but yet one of the arguments is that mothers can't get fathers to help pay and raise the babies. Well, you're not giving me an opinion if you're not giving me a chance to do that. It's very hypocritical. Most arguments are very hypocritical and everything. But so I guess where I was going is that we need to educate ourselves on the basis of our belief. Too oftentimes Christians put themselves in situations that they want to stand for their beliefs, but they haven't done the due diligence of doing research and being able to understand how to succinctly state what they believe and give the Christian argument for that. So one place that I like to refer to back to is the Family Research Council, and that is run by Tony Perkins. He is so it's a they do a lot of work in Washington. They do a lot of work with lawmakers. They do a lot of work with these religious liberty law firms. And so Family Research Council is almost always going to be someone I revert back to understand. They actually have out a pro-life engagement prayer guide, which I think people need to really go in and look at it. It comes from their Center for Biblical Worldview, and it's a very thoughtful prayer guide. It's 3 pages long, and I think that is a good resource for the Christian who, as we transition into our next topic, who needs to prayerfully decide, how do we move forward? Now that the decision has been overturned, now that it's back to the states, what is our job as the church? How do we view life? And we can't just be anti-abortion. We must be pro-life. And we must be pro-whole life. And that means we come alongside people who have a different worldview from us, and we help them in their time of need. The church has been guilty, and I say this to the church at large, not individual churches or individual church members, but we have been guilty of being proponents of life, but doing nothing in the next step. And so this is time for the church. It is the charge for the church to step up and be the hands and feet of Jesus, and come alongside our pregnancy resource centers, and come alongside our foster care our foster care organizations, and make sure we take care of those lives, and make sure that we do the job that God has called us to do. He reached out to the marginalized. He held sin accountable. When the woman at the well came to him, he didn't say, "It's okay, your circumstances made you this way." He said, "How many husbands do you have?" And he's not, you know better. I mean, really, he told her, "You know better than that. All this strife that is coming to you is coming because you have all these husbands. You need to go and sin no more." So yes, our job is to hold people accountable, but it's also to come alongside them and tell them how we recover that. And I think that has been a lacking that we have in the church.
Our pregnancy resource centers are going to have to really, really work harder. Hopefully, they won't be as many but they may be. We don't know.
Well,
So
if
we're
there's
gonna
not as many abortions, there may be more children being born.
yeah.
That are unplanned for, that are unwanted.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be the need for adoptive services, for foster care
So
services.
they may have to transition to be more of an adoptive service type, which will be a whole another world to deal with. Right now, our foster care system is overburdened. I heard last week that they were having to rent rooms in hotels to put some of these children. So that's a whole another problem that the church needs to be involved in trying to help, because it's not going to get better. That's going to get worse with what's going on now, and we need to open our eyes and see that, and that's a tremendous opportunity for the church to get involved in and minister to.
And we really need to start earnestly building into our culture, prayer around whole life value, and not just being anti-abortion, but being whole life value. Yep. We need to make sure. I mean, we're able to say that in a worldview, but do we live it? Yeah. And I think it's important for the church now.
It needs to be more than a line in your program. It has
right.
to be something you're actually walking out in an everyday working.
That's right. Because if not, we have tinkling cymbals, but there's no, it sounds good, but there's no work to it. Right. And we're always challenged. We are not a salvation based on works, but we are a salvation that works. Right. And I think we have to really, and for a long time, we've gotten caught up in just sitting on our hands and woe is me, but now the time has changed. Right. And it's time for us to be what God has called us to be, and that is to reach out to the poor and the weak and the needy, and to draw them unto Him. And we are the way. We are the body of Christ. We're all different body parts, but we are to be used to bring about His glory and His kingdom. And we do that when we take the greatest commandment is love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and spirit, and love your neighbor as yourself. And to do that, we must take on this challenge and rise to the occasion. For my lifetime, there's been no spur to action, but this really is a call to action for the church.
Yep, I agree.
I would encourage you to go and educate yourselves. Use the online resources that are there. Look for ways to work in your community. Here in Southwest Georgia, there are multiple pregnancy resource centers. In Worth County, where we live, we have a pregnancy resource center. Look for ways to support. We have a foster care community here. Look for ways to support these families. Look for ways to support. The first thing you must do is submit yourself to a prayer life about it, and use the resources. Like I said, on this Family Research Channel, there's a prayer guide that will prepare your heart to respond to the call. We need to start now. Laws will start coming into effect pretty soon. And unfortunately, this is not going to ban abortion. No. There are many states in the United States that had laws that were set to enact because of the leak, were set to enact as soon as the Supreme Court ruling came down. I was reading an article just this afternoon that in the state of California, there is no ban on abortion up until full term. So you can be ready to deliver and can still choose abortion. So, and I don't know in what state of mind any lawmaker could put that into the books, but it's there. And there are other, New York is that way, California is there, Illinois. Oregon is there, Illinois. So many of our more liberal states have these already going into effect. So we need to be prayerfully going to the throne of God for those leaders in those states, and for our leaders in our states. If there has been there's many states who have heartbeat laws or conception laws that they've been working on that now is reverting back to that. So we need to the church to be in prayer for those laws. This is a joyous occasion, but it is also a serious occasion, I think, that we need to...
We don't need to miss this opportunity.
That's right. We have... we were talking today, and it's never struck me this way before, but those people groups in the Bible that God judged most harshly were people groups who performed child sacrifice. Was it Moloch? In that they were offering babies up to Moloch, in the Bible, and that is what abortion is. Abortion is child sacrifice to the God of self, and we have got to get on our knees and ask God to lead us and guide us through this.
Yep.
So thank you for joining us today. We wanted to really go ahead and address just our thoughts on what the Christian response is to the overturning of Roe v. Wade and the Casey case, and it's a monumentous day for the pro-life movement, and we rejoice with our brothers and sisters in Christ who have worked so hard to bring this about, but we also know it is a challenge and a charge to Christians in the United States of America to go out and see how we can rise to the need that is now going to be present. So we encourage you to seek those resources both in your local community and outside your community to see how you can make a difference for God. Thank you for joining us today for a special episode of Truth Talk.